Om Ada Eva Ratanabao Samhatra Yatra Najaha Sa Ishon Chastarate Buhuda Jayamanaha Om Mityeva Jayatha Atmanam Swastivaha Paraya Tamasaha Parastat Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. There, in the center, in the heart, at the hub, where all the thousands of subtle nerve endings meet, abides the Atman, ever stationary but becoming manifold. We meditate upon that self as Om. And Godspeed to you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us, may that Brahman sustain us, and may that Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, and with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. A big welcome to everyone here on this beginning of a 3-weekend class, 3-Sunday class, we should say, on a new Upanishad. Last week we finished the Atma Upanishad, which talked to us about the exterior Atman that we see, taste, touch, hearing, smell, with the senses and the 5 elements there, and then the internal Atman, which is pretty much the subtle body called Sharira Sukshma, or the mind, and its subtle thought processes. And then that's called the Antaratma. So Bahya Atma, outer Atman, Antaratman, inner Atman, and then the Supreme Atman or Paramatman, sometimes called Shantatmanan. So because there is where the Supreme Self shows its best quality in this peace that passes all understanding, as Jesus once said it. But otherwise, Paramatman, or the Supreme Self, that's beyond outer and inner. So it's a good teaching to take in, and it's in part, it's taken up also right at the beginning of this new Upanishad called the Advaya Taraka Upanishad. It's another one of the little short jewels that I've been picking on purpose so that we have enough time to go through every sloka in it as deeply as possible in 3 1-hour and 15-minute classes, basically, over 3 Sundays of a month. So in the case of the Advaya Taraka Upanishad, it's also talking about the apparent difference between the living being and Brahman as being the cause of ignorance. So it's as if to say, and it's put in a very straightforward way in this Upanishad, it just pretty much comes out and says that why are you thinking yourself to be Brahman is the second sloka, basically. That's ignorance. Why are you thinking yourself to be separate from Brahman? The living being is Brahman. And it's the not knowing that fact is what's causing you suffering. And so we could say that that extends everywhere from the suffering in the outer Atman to the suffering in the mind, the internal Atman, but then it gets truncated and removed at the highest state of consciousness, which is the Paramatman. So that idea has to fall away. And we'll take up a series of charts today that shows how people are dwelling in the basement of this Brahman and need to pull themselves up and out of it in some way, and a few methods in which to do so. The Upanishads in general don't take up a lot of methods, as we know. They just pretty much state the fact and retire from the field. It says, oh, did you forget this? Or don't forget this. This is the truth. and they're best for stating the truth. And then you'll have to go to other darshanas in India, like the Sankhya or the Yoga darshanas, to find out the methods, if you can't just believe this on face value, that thou art Brahman, or I and my Father are one. And because in this day and age, that's kind of a lot to bite off for most people. Talk about your Brahman bites. That's a big one that you have to try and most people can just take a small bite of that truth and chew on it for a while. We looked at that last week as being shravana, to hear, and then chewing on it is dhamanana in your mind. Father Yogi says that happens quite often over a long time in the attitude of devotion and faith. We were talking about faith a lot yesterday at satsang. And then that realization begins to dawn slowly upon them that the self is one with Brahman. So we were given concessions in the last 3 Sundays when we studied the Atma Upanishad, in the fact that it just came out pretty much and worked on these apparent divisions, and saying all these things you're seeing externally, all these things that you're knowing internally, and all these things that are beyond seeing and knowing, beyond external and internal, beyond body and mind, are the non-dual truth of the matter. So those were concessions they were giving us, because a lot of people are stumbling over the fact that the body decays and the mind forgets. And basically, those are the 2 problems with body and mind, isn't it? Otherwise, we could say, oh, maybe we are the body and mind. But those things always get in the way, called the first noble truth and so forth. And so no sensible person can make a conclusion, philosophically speaking, that holds water, or that's worth its snuff, as they say, in the face of the fact that there's birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death happening all the time. We looked at that 4 Sundays ago when we were looking at another Upanishad previous to these 2. So these small Upanishads we're taking up, and we're looking into them very deeply. And I just chanted what the Upanishad takes up here with the from the Mundaka Upanishad, basically. Ara Eva Ratanabhau. Ratanabhau is a chariot. So of course it's a symbol in India that goes all the way back to Krishna, and before him, the charioteer, and holding the reins of prana, connected to the 5 senses, roving the 5 elements outward. Ara Eva Ratanabhau Samhatra Yatra Najaha is the first line. So it's talking about how in the heart is the Atman, and there are hundreds and thousands of inward nadis, nerves, subtle nerves leading to it, there at the hub. And when you, as this Upanishad puts it, the Advaya Taraka Upanishad puts it, one of the 3 things you need to do is to find the end of the nadis. That's how it's put in the Upanishad. So once you're through traveling all the roads, you get to the destination. The nadis are all the roads that run from waking, dreaming to deep sleep, that run from the external worlds to the kings of heaven within you, to the end of all traveling, into liberation, that means. And so the yogi is looking to find the end of those roads. But how can he find the end of those roads when he hasn't seen the roads yet, you see? And there's where we learn a few beautiful new Sanskrit terms in our vocabulary that we're taking on. So the Taraka Upanishad, Taraka can mean a lot of things. It's also a name for Shiva, for instance. And it's good because Shiva helps beings cross over and get liberation. So the crossover part is what this Upanishad's referring to. Taraka means to cross over. And so when I chanted Ara Eva Ratanabhau, you noticed that in the English, the last line was, God speeds you in crossing over to the final liberation, to beyond the ocean of birth and death, to your final destination, beyond the ocean of darkness. That's tamas, parastat, tamas, parastat. See, tamasala. So basically, may you cross over this ocean of darkness, that darkness which consists of where is God, when God and you are one and the same, asking questions that don't make sense. to the Lord or to Ishvara or to the Divine Mother. They said, well, I put them there on earth so that they could celebrate being one with Brahman. What happened? They're falling into all of these misconceptions that they're separate. And then they're separating themselves from the Lord and then crying out in their suffering, saying, where are you, God? And they're not remembering that I put God within them in the form of the Atman. And that's where you have to then maybe keep aware of this in presence of the inner Atman. I mean, if you're just living in the outer Atman alone, that's body, mind, body, and so forth, senses, five elements, and so forth. A lot of people then don't think of their mind as the kingdoms of heaven within, as I used to say. That's where the kingdoms of heavens are, not up, not down towards hell, not out towards the five elements. It's in the mind. Those are where you'll find them. So this is another new word that we're finding out in this Upanishad called the Advaya Taraka Upanishad. Basically, it's talking about Taraka, how to cross over. And not too far along then, it starts talking about the space in the heart. Dahara kasha is the word they use for that. So when you say there within where all the subtle nerve endings meet, those subtle nerve endings are moving through all these worlds, kings of heaven, if you want to put it that way. And in dream life tonight, you'll see some of them. You'll come, you'll visit, you'll go. And then you'll wake up and you'll think, oh, here I am back in the outer Atman. I hope you think that. But here I am back in the outer world. And I hope you also wake up knowing that you are one with Brahman and that those worlds are within you. The kings of heaven are within you. Isn't that what he said? So you shouldn't forget these things. Number one, I'm one with Brahman. Number two, these worlds are within me and I'm moving through them as consciousness. I'm taking on bodies. Call it 5 sheaths if you want. Call it 3 shariras, coverings. Call it waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. 3 states that I'm moving through constantly and waking back up again. And whatever you want to assign it to from all the beautiful teachings that have come out of Mother India, specific and pertinent to this teaching, that's what you want to wake up with. Wake up here, of course, means just not from sleep last night and a few dreams, but you must wake up from the waking state. That's great teaching from our great Advaita Gaudapada. Waking state means you'll realize that all of this is definitely the changing Atman. And if you realize all of this is just Maya, that's only a part of a realization that souls get. And then they withdraw from it and they fear it, or they get averse to it. Right? That's not where the Upanishads are coming from. So you wake up to the fact that, oh, it is changing, but I thought they said all this was Brahman too, you see. So how do I take these 2 black rocks and smash them together so that what's left over is my realization? See, I probably should say, Durga Devi Gayatri Om Tat Chayanaya Midbahe. Say that Durga mantra, because she's the one that makes these impossible things possible. She's the one that put that Atman within you, and she's the one that will give you the transforming power of dream to waken yourself up out of the bad dream of forgetfulness. So anyway, back to Dharakasha. So we have these 2 words we want to look at. Taraka, to cross over, and then Dharakasha. It really means space of the heart. But the Upanishad goes to say beyond the space of the heart, says the yogi will either realize it as the space in the heart or will realize it as the space between the 2 eyebrows. They give both in that Upanishad. So if you ever had this sort of conflict between what your teachers told you, what you read in the scriptures, and what you yourself have wondered between my heart and my mind, then you can see how they're really not calling that those 2 different. Basically, when you transcend Muladhara, Sahasrara, Muladhara, and then Svadhisthana and Manipura, at that place, heart and mind become the same. Before then, you're studying about them as being different. So you're causing this division between heart and your mind. But this Upanishad comes along and says, the yogi realizes it through, take your pick, the cave in the heart or the space between the eyebrows. And in order to do that, it's going to have to open the space between the eyebrows. The pertinence of that is that that's where you'll find the akasha on display in your mind, in your dream, in your meditation, in your envisionment. You see, you close the eyes, you open this one. It's a facet, a fact as old as spiritual practice itself. It's ancient and actually timeless. So that's what I wanted to introduce to you first. Advaya is, you've heard the famous word Advaita. So it's almost like that, isn't it? I'll put an I there, you've almost got it. So it's really, Advaya means without two. See, without two. Advaita means is basically the same thing, non-dual. So Advaya Taraka, you'd get the idea from this rishi who really came up with a real brainstorm here and dawned upon us another beautiful way, just like Angaris did last week, the last 3 weeks when we studied the Atma Upanishad with the 3 different classifications of the Atman. It's all one Atman, he says, here's the way it appears. But we don't look at it as more as 3. We look at it as 1 in 3 different manifestations of itself. That's a philosophical move that's a bit rare for narrow-minded philosophers, see, and religionists, conventional religionists, and so forth. And for people who are doing discipline, sadhana, basically they get on this neti-neti, and that's mentioned right away here. You understand these by neti-neti, it says. So that neti-neti has to be accompanied by what I showed you 2 Sundays ago, that chart on neti-neti and iti-iti. I see how those 2 go back and forth. I'm not this, but the real I is manifesting this. I'm not that, but the real me is playing with that. You see, and I'm not neither this nor that, but the real me, the real I, is expressing through that and this. So you can never remove the existence of the witness that's looking on. As my teacher once put it, very nice and astounded everyone listening at one lecture, he said, you can go on renouncing till you're blue in the face. You can renounce this, you can renounce that, but you can never, and you can do away with all of this, see, in neti-neti fashion, but you can never do away with the one who's doing the renouncing. The one who's actually moving to do away with things. So Sri Ramakrishna put it more simply, if you've got a big stack of books and you want the one in the bottom, tough luck, right? You've got to do a lot of work. It's not that much work to remove each book one by one to get what you want, but that's what you're going to have to do. And it doesn't mean that the one in the bottom is non-existent. It doesn't mean that the book on the bottom is inaccessible, right? And you can even see the book on the bottom, so you know it exists. So it's just a matter of a little bit of groundwork so that you can get that book on the bottom, open it, and read the book of nature, as Vivekananda said, from page to page. And when you've read the book of nature, you put the book down, and you were the same when you picked up the book as when you put it down. You just had a bunch of passing experiences, sometimes fleeting experiences, sometimes transitory experiences, but also sometimes some enriching experiences, like the ones that are listed in the Upanishads. You can tell that these beings really had enriching experiences because they remembered that there was a way to move across the ocean of suffering. So we can show this chart just as an introductory for right now. I'm going to go in a different direction, but to see I always create a kind of main chart when I start out a series like this. You can see the top of it, esoteric practice of Advaya Taraka Yoga. No, I didn't really make that up in the Upanishad. They call it once Taraka Yoga, and another time he calls it Advaya Taraka Yoga. So this is one of the 30 Yoga Upanishads. I think there's some 30 of the 108 Upanishads that are classified as a Yoga Upanishad. We know there's some Devi Upanishads and some Vishnu Upanishads. We know there's some Kundalini Upanishads, and actually this one, they could be classed as a Kundalini Upanishad too. I've got a very powerful teaching and exercise for you that we'll do sometime during this class around the Kundalini, because it's a part of opening this doorway in the heart, the akasha, part of seeing, opening what's between the eyebrows, is you're going to have to, as Sri Ramakrishna said in the Gospel, to without the awakening of Mother Kundalini, no spiritual progress is possible. So no matter what you call her, a goddess or consciousness or whatever, Kali, she's got to awaken in you. You've got to actually awaken to her, is what I like to say. And then you'll find yourself moving along at a good pace, and obstacles will disappear with the utterance of her name. And that book on the bottom will be of easy access to you now. You can remove all other usurpers of the throne out of the way. So subtitled there, you see, crossing over the suffering-filled, ignorance-prone sea of the world. So if I'm here and I haven't crossed over it, then there's no denying, as Buddha said with the First Noble Truth, that suffering is. And we're seeing it everywhere. Even if I myself have managed to escape it to some extent or for some period of time, nonetheless, I'll run into it somehow with my friends, my family, through the media. If war comes to my country, I'll run into this suffering, even if I'm right now in a position where it's not affecting me so much. Of course, compassion, as we said, and yesterday at satsang and so forth, is a very important part of dealing with suffering of the world. So that, and then you're also the ignorance-prone sea of the world means that people who fall into it obviously are not in full possession of their intelligence. That's called alpameda in the Krishna and the Gita. It's tiny intelligence. So somehow when they came into the body in the physical world, they left their memory of their past lifetimes out. Remember, I used to, back in the old days, say, if you were a wizard and you had a magic wand to create worlds, and you created a world and you liked it so much you got into it. But after you created the world, you put your wand down, stunned by the world, and you walked into the world, and you forgot you had a wand that could get you out of it. You also forgot that the world was the construct of your own mind, of your own magical thinking process. So that's what most people, how you could explain, most people have the Atman in them, but they don't have a way of uncovering it now anymore. They made the projection, they took on the body, they took on parents, they took on country, and many of them, as far as we're concerned right now, maybe not so much in terms of this Upanishad, but in terms of now in the Kali Yuga, have been born in that age of darkness where this is a common occurrence. This isn't something that, oh, you forgot your Atman? How strange. I've never met anyone like you before. So it's like, oh, you forgot your Atman too? Well, join the club. We've all forgotten our Atman. We don't even know what the word means anymore. And we're also forgetting the word God. And we're also forgetting how to be compassionate. And we don't have any more attraction to the number one word that was on the minds of both Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, truth, satya. Those were the two words that were most prominent in their vocabulary. Sri Ramakrishna once said that, oh, take my wisdom, take my ignorance, give me pure love for you. Oh Lord, take my virtue, take my vice, give me pure love for you. He went through all the dualities. He started to say, give me truth and and he couldn't go any further. So he would not sacrifice truth. That was at the foundation of everything. So this is what I mean about those beings who have fallen into the suffering-filled, ignorance-prone sea of the world. And a nice shorthand Sanskrit word for that of 3 syllables is samsara. This is samsaric life here. And even if it's happy and joyous and full of pleasure, the seers look at that, well, that's going to pass. That's also a part of samsara. So what will destroy samsara forever is my remembrance that all of this is Brahman, and all of this lies inside of my own mind. You know, that's between the 2 eyebrows. It's all there. And, or if you want to put it that way, in my heart. So we used to put together Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga to explain that. And then we started talking about Brahma Gyan and Prema Bhakti, how the highest of both of these, heart and mind. Then we found a word called Medakendra, intelligent heart. See, the home of intelligence is in the heart. So there's many ways in Sanskrit with amongst the rishis there, of which they're talking about this combination, the unbeatable combination of heart and mind. Here we find it in the Upanishad put in even another way that's very ideal. And so that will, discovering that will get you beyond this suffering-filled, ignorance-prone sea of the world. Here's a quote that we can jump ahead to. All that is perceived by the sensory organs is with form. That which lies in between the 2 eyelids is without form. The Dharakasha, the inner realms, can only be seen by the mind's eye. The yogis utilize the mind's ability of concentration and comprehension to see what is beyond both the universe and the mind. Well, think back to last week's class in the main chart there. So it's beyond the outer Atman, it's beyond the inner Atman, right? It's beyond the Bahya Atman, it's beyond the Antaratman. It's the supreme soul, supreme Atman. That's universe and mind, basically. Universe is full of bodies, physical universe, and full of senses, full of objects and so forth. And everyone's feasting on those in the waking state. And then you go into a quiet time, reflection, study, or sleep. All of a sudden, intelligence, the mind marches forward, and you find yourself to be still there, but without the weights of the physical body and the senses. You've got subtle senses now, and you've got a subtle body. And that's where people lodge themselves who find a way to distance themselves from the body, like suicides. Friend of ours, we heard a friend of ours, family, committed suicide not too long ago. So suicides are just going right back into their mind again, like a dream they were having when they were awake. They were in the body, they were sleeping one night, they had a dream, and that was back in their mind. So then the person commits suicide, they go right back to that thought they were having in the mind. So that's what they call this suffering-prone, ignorance-prone, suffering-filled wheel of samsara, going on and on like that. So Upanishad moves right away to gives us that information about which is with form and that which is beyond form. Let's take it straight from the Upanishad, and I want to probably spend this Sunday class. This is going to be a 3-series class on 3 Sundays. We'll spend this one pretty much on slokas 1 and 2, because they're unlike the Atma Upanishad, which are very quick ones. These are very fat. Each sloka has a lot of truth in it. So the Rishi starts out, and we can chant it together. Om Purnamadaha. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. And this English translation here is that Brahman is infinite and this universe is infinite. The infinite proceeds from the infinite. Then taking the infinitude of the infinite universe, it remains as the infinite alone. Let there be peace with me, peace in my environment, peace with the forces that act upon me. Om, peace, peace, peace. So this is one of the famous 7 peace chants. Everyone in this room and many people watching have received a request from me that you memorize all 7 and have done so. So this is what starts out the Advaya Taraka Upanishad, Om Purnamadaha. Now the first sloka says this: that which helps you cross from the fear of birth, aging, and death is called Tarakam. Okay, just there we get our, right away, the rishis don't mince words. They don't hesitate, they don't wait, and they don't build up to anything. They just come out, as the Upanishads are famous for doing, with stating the truth. So Tarayati means to cross. So that's a footnote here, means that Taraka shouldn't be mistaken necessarily for like Lord Shiva or some of the other meanings that Taraka has, because but doesn't it make sense that if it means to cross, then Taraka would also be a name for Shiva who is helping you to cross. So there's really no problem with applying several meanings. But here specifically, that's which helps you cross the ocean full of fear of birth, aging, and death is called Tarakam. Understanding the appearance of the living being and God as separate entities is due to illusion. That's the second statement. So you see what I see how direct it is. It takes you off guard. It could have used a little bit different arrangement of words, but here there's nothing. You're thinking maybe they're taking you into neti right away. They're not. They're telling you the truth right away. Then they'll take you into neti. So basically, it's understanding the appearance of the living being and God as separate entities is due to illusion, due to ignorance. I'll say it again, understanding the appearance of the living being. Let's take that much of it. You appeared out of where? Well, they would tell you out of your own mind. You created bodies, you created 5 senses, 5 elements were created, so forth and so on. And you projected yourself into a body, into the womb, and as a fetus and so forth. So that's well documented, not only just in philosophy, but in the worlds. It's just that in most of the world systems, they're not accounting for you doing the projecting, that you got yourself here into you saw the ocean of samsara with all its thrills and didn't look at all of its problems, and you dove in. And that pretty much defines or describes millions of souls in the world today who don't know where they came from, they don't know where they're going, and they don't know, if they find out they're bound, they don't know how to get free, and they don't know who they are, right? And so the Upanishads have been listed and in existence for thousands of years. And so they're not, that's why they put it so directly. That which helps you get across this ocean of birth and death is called Taraka. It helps you cross this. What's keeping you from crossing, or what caused you to come here, is you thought that your appearance as a living being was somehow separate from God. See? No, that was God manifesting through you. And if you took on body-mind mechanism, or what we call psychophysical being, and you said God is doing this, then you would have not had any problem all this time. In fact, strangely enough, and ironically, magically almost, the ocean of samsara would not be the ocean of samsara. It would be the ocean of bliss. So samsara sagara equals ananda sagara, right? Because Sri Ramakrishna, fully illumined, can be standing next to an ordinary man. They both have the same body made of 5 elements. They're both existing in the same world. They both have the same mind and a brain, that is, and body, and everything, but one of them's existing in bliss here on the physical earth, and the other is suffering here on earth. Suffering and enjoying, suffering and enjoying. So this is what is meant by such straightforward statements like this. So understanding the appearance of the living being and God as separate entities is due to ignorance. And then examining and understanding the differences which exist in the world by the method of not this, not this. At last, what remains is Advaya Brahman, that which does not have two forms. To get it, we have to practice three aims. And so this sets up the three aims and three ways of proceeding, which we will be looking at, touching on today, but not completely looking and filling this whole chart out. I'm going to take you towards a few other teachings that are going to help us unwrap this first sloka better. I'm tempted to share with you sloka 2, though, because we'll go back to sloka 1 and look at some of these teachings, but there's one thing that the Upanishad wants to give you out front, and this is that experiment I was talking to you about, which you can do basically is a meditation. It's a visualization meditation that you get. And the Rishi says it this way: in the middle of the body, there exists the Sushumna Nadi, which is as bright as the sun and cool as the moon. It starts from the Muladhara, that's the base of the spine, and goes up to the Brahmarandra, that's at the top of the middle of the skull. It is well known that in the middle of it, there exists Kundalini, which is as bright as crores of suns and as thin as a lotus thread. That one who sees her with his mind's eye attains salvation and gets rid of all transgressions. Sloka 2. So you can see why I brought it out early, because then they give you a way of envisioning this. So I'll show you that at the end of this class or at the beginning of next Sunday's class, is that you have to see these 6 chakras inside yourself. You have to sit down and with that instruction say, there's the Muladhara, there's the Sahasrara, and there's those lands in between, those centers in between. And there's all these nadis flowing through them, along which I'm walking in my waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. My deep sleep state, I'm quiet amongst them. And so then you have to envision this inside of yourself and know that Kundalini is flowing through all of them. But you have to become aware of that. If she's as slender as a lotus thread, it's going to be difficult to find her at first. Because if you've taken apart a lotus stalk, you'll see how many threads can come off of that and come out of that. So that's a visualization that the Upanishad, and I can tell you that there are some metaphors and some analogies they use. We talked about 2 of them yesterday, sun and ocean, right? During satsang and Godblog sessions yesterday. We had 2 sessions together of an hour each. So, but to have an actual visualization is not really given in the Upanishads very often. So this is kind of rare. And this is why this is called a yoga Upanishad. But I'm also saying that it shares that Kundalini yoga system with it, obviously, because the very second sloka, they're talking about her, the Divine Mother. So to cross over Tarakam is then very important. And that which helps you cross over this ocean is this Divine Mother and this knowledge that all of these centers are within you. All the kingdoms lie within you. Christ didn't give that out just to impress people. He was maybe not even just to say that, you're believing too much in the outer, and you don't know that the outer came from the inner. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam. You don't know that the finite came from the infinite. And yet still being yet being infinite, only infinite remains, as the very first peace chant told us. So if Christ is looking at that condition in his part of the Kali Yuga, back in in the time when he was embodied, then basically he's looking at people and saying, "Kingdom of heaven lies within you," and wanting to give a deeper teaching, a deeper turn on people's consciousness at that time. So he's saying basically, if you want to cross over the sea of birth and death, all the suffering that's being caused by the fall of Judaism, by the insinuation of the Romans into your life, by all these problems that are happening, poverty and so forth, fear, aging, and death around you, then you're going to want to remember that all of this is within you, lying within you. So call it the 6 chakras then, or call it the 7 lokas. Call them the 5 akashas. There's so many ways in which India has been telling her people who are born there for ages that, in so many different ways in which she's explaining to them that this is all within them. It's held in the Dharakasha, space of the heart and the space between the eyebrows. That's where it is. So if you're going to do follow the visualization there, then in one breath, as it were, I see it. It's there like a network. It's there within me. And that's what I've been coursing along and through all the time, just like a river passes through many canyons and many valleys. All my consciousness has been passing through that all the time, and it's doing it right now. And that's why when I breathe and breathe out, I become aware that it's doing that, because prana is a sign of life. It's a sign of subtle life, psychic prana. So that's something that you want to do right off the bat. So the Upanishad basically in 2 slokas is saying that there's an ocean of suffering that you've found yourself in, and here's what you need to cross over it, number 1. Number 2, in order to cross over it, you must know that it's a projection of your own mind. It's in your own mind. You're the one that's doing this. Can't blame God or devil. Can't seek help from a savior. A savior can tell you about it. He can't lift you out of it. You have to do that. So you do that then by realizing that she's within you. The Mother Kundalini, the very power that makes all of this possible, is within you, which is why Sri Ramakrishna brought that Mother Kali out of the cremation grounds of India, one song sings, in this day and age, and woke her up. So, Paramaguru Sri Ramakrishna, Laho Pranam, Namaskar. Paramaguru Siddha Yogi. Mata Bhakta Yuga Avatar are the 2 beautiful lines of that, which I could sing for you. But basically, that's how the Upanishads start out, crystallized in a nutshell, is what they want you to know right away. And then you can move on to finding the nadis and finding the end of the nadis. That's over here. Let's see. I'm going to find the end of the nadis because you've been traveling along them so far. You've been turning and coming back, right? That's a wheel. So you follow them, your consciousness follows them through waking, dreaming, deep sleep. It finds an end in deep sleep. Then it turns and goes back to dreaming and waking and finds the body and the world again. That's part, and it's doing it all unconsciously. So now it has to do all of this consciously. And when it starts to do it consciously, then it can see that when it went into deep sleep, oh, that's the end of a road I just walked. It's like, say, a person goes on a beautiful hike and a path in a beautiful jungle, reaches the end of the trail, but doesn't see the destination, like a beautiful castle there, and just looks around and only sees, oh, this is the end of the trail. I think I'll go back, and misses the whole destination. But in deep sleep, you found yourself in the formless realm. You found you there. That's called Sushupti, and Sushupti leads to Turiya, right? That sounds a lot like Taraka too, doesn't it? It's basically, you're finding this ultimate goal that you are moving towards all the time, but then you see it and you turn away from it for some reason and go back and wake up the same person you always were, even though you were right there at the feet of God. So we take refuge in that light every night. We see it and we walk along the nadis, the subtle nerves. And when we reach deep sleep, we've come to the end, but we don't affirm this is the end of the path. At some point, when when the soul leaves the body, it will uh, experience the end of the nadis, and it will merge back to its source. That's liberation or moksha or mukti. Kaivalya. Those are words. Samadhi, satori, asampragata. There's so many words for that. And that's what the soul will see beyond what it saw just in deep sleep. Remember, it's not going to see any of this if this remains closed, if this remains shut. You see, the cave of the heart has an entrance. You have to get into the cave of the heart. And when you do, you'll find that that has this eye there, this wisdom eye. Jnana Chakshu, Krishna calls it when he tells Arjuna about it on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So cave and heart, you see, entrance and eye, that is what remains hidden and obscured and very elusive to millions of souls, as long as they don't open this chamber of the heart and this wisdom eye. Or in other words, it understands the appearance of the living being and God as two separate things. Take, for instance, Swami Vivekananda, born right away, as he realizes, goes to Sri Ramakrishna, right away Sri Ramakrishna touches him, realizes, I'm Atma Brahma. Sri Ramakrishna used to say about Naren, he belongs to the realm of the formless. And Sri Ramakrishna was there nurturing more souls who belong to the realm of the of form. See, you see that in the gospel when you read it. He used to say, some of my gurus, some of my students look at Narendra meditating on formlessness and become frightened and turn and run away. See? But Naren has no fear of that. He goes right into that formlessness. He's of the realm of the formless. So we have to try and understand that there are some souls like that, that when they opened their eyes and shut their eyes, they were always in that Advaya state. They'd already done the Taraka, and they had come to know that, that there's not two things here. Advaya means not two bodies. So if you're born right away, aren't you thinking, oh, here's my body, oh, and there's someone else's body, or here's the body and there's nature. That's the second body. So there's always this Dvaitahina, this Dvaita. And what you want is Dvaitahina, to go beyond, keep seeing two-ness all the time by knowing that there's just one Brahman all the time. And just because you're appearing as two doesn't mean that that truth changes at all. The appearance is not the reality of the thing. So some expansion on this first nice fat and healthy sloka then makes us want to look at some other charts. We'll come back to our main chart here, but since it's a yoga Upanishad, let's look at this chart real quick. And we can go through these charts, these ones I'm going to show quite quickly, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the actual teachings of them. Just they're to show us how to cross over the idea of two-ness, or that I'm separate from Brahman, or get ourselves out of the ocean of ignorance and suffering, right? So look at the lower left. Control the speech, Shankara says. Then remain alone and practice yoga. Then control the senses and the mind. I'm going through the doorways here, because this is called Shankara's doorways to yoga. So those first three are very important. Control the speech, remain alone. That is kevala asti. I have to go back and put myself in quietude so that I can see what I'm doing, and then control the senses of the mind, and then control thought. So you can see how really that's going from bahya atma, right, to antaratma. So you're going through, if you want to look at it in last week's Upanishad terms, you can see how all of these things belong pretty much to the outer Atman. But then all of a sudden you're finding yourself in your mind. But you couldn't find yourself in your mind and open that doorway until these three were accomplished. It's like being in a room of people and, okay, we're all going to meditate now. Let's meditate. So you meditate for 20 minutes and people start having a conversation. So that control of speech is not there. So that's a mini example of how people are loud. Garrulous is a nice word for that. It's like the woman who was so talkative, they called her loquacia. So basically, there's just talking going along all the time. And so that's taking up all your time. And you never go alone away from that talk and stay in silence so that you can join the word with the mind. See, so these you can look at these separate boxes, but I'm taking you through the main doorways. So control of the thought brings you then in towards the ability to traverse the most stormy waves of that ocean of samsara, right? It's that constant vibration of sound and talk and sensual attraction and external objects. Those are the main waves of the ocean of samsara, which keep people from realizing that that there is an ocean of suffering and that they're in it, because they're always distracted by all of these things. It'd only be if you reached the doorway of silence and took a look at that you might want to draw back from that. I hear the sound of the waves. I don't just see the waves. That sounds like home. It's like putting a conch shell to your ear and going away from a crowd on the beach and putting a conch shell to your ear, and everyone goes, ooh, see. So, yeah, don't just see the waves, listen to the sound. So I said we were going to go through this quickly. This is a way in which you cross over. This is the Shankara's way of yoga, because he commented on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Father of yoga was Patanjali, father of Advaita Vedanta, as far as that's concerned. He and his line was Shankara. So he's commenting on the eight-limb yoga, and this is how he's saying it goes inward. So we're following, remember the main Advaya Taraka. This is how you cross over, right, to get to the non-dual Brahman. So you're taking all of these back inside of yourself. And then what you reach next is attainment of peace. And after that, the ego vanishes. After that, the bliss of Brahman comes. Oh, how many doorways did I have to pass through in order to get that beautiful bliss of Brahman? You see, that is the nectar of ambrosia, the nectar of immortality that is just waiting for me there. It's like hanging on one of the lotuses, they say, inside of these the karasha, basically hanging on one of the lotuses. And the yogis like to take it from that lotus and offer it to Mother in the shrine of their heart. So there are even descriptions of that in inward process. And then finally, the ability to attach and detach at will was actually a quote from my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj. So if we take the subsidiary boxes, it would be like this: be quiet and destroy darkness by seeing oneness again. And give up expectations, desires, practice non-receiving. Aparigraha, right? Then join the word with the mind. So all those words you were hearing before, you want to limit them, dissolve them down into just one important word, like this word, an Upanishad. That's one word that you want to hear. And then join that mind to the intellect, join the ego, the intellect to the ego, join the ego to the witness, and let the witness vanish into Brahman, to the bliss of Brahman. Om mano nabhuti sharira indriyam tanmatram bhutani nabhuta panchakam is how it's said in Sanskrit. And then aham kritas chapi. Aham is the ego. Aham kritas chapi. Vyat swarupakam. Find the essence of the ego, the swarupa. Tam ishtamatmanam. You'll find out by meditating on the ishtam that you found the Atman in you. Tam ishtamatmanam upuiti shashvatam. That's the end of the process. Mano nabhuti sharira tanmatra indriyam bhutani nabhuta panchakam. Those have all come out of you from here. Now take them back here and dissolve them there. And cross the ocean of samsara. If it's giving you a problem, if it's not giving you a problem and it looks like the ocean of bliss to you, then more power to you, like Sri Ramakrishna. Enjoy the Leela. But if the Maya has somehow crept in there and it's ruining the picture and keeping you bound, you can't get to that book that's on the bottom of the stack, then you're going to have to do some sadhana, some strong practice to call yourself back. See, it's like a boy out playing and his mother calls him, dinner's ready. So he has to come through the neighborhood and back all the roads that he took to get to the playground and then come back to dinner at home before sun sets. So it's like that call of the divine, calling you back to your source. That's it. That's all I wanted to say as we look at this series of charts, which are going to go back very rapidly. Now let's look at this. This is another way of putting it. Also using Viveka Chudamani of Shankara. Now here you can see it's put in terms of how did I get into the ocean of suffering? The ball of my mind got away from me. You see? And there was a big stairway nearby on a multi-tiered house with many floors, and it just hit one stairway, it rolled down step by step. Down it went, and the boy had to run after it to find his favorite plaything. That is the soul finding himself again, and had to go all the way to the basement. And so this is a frozen river. The student sent me a picture of this, and it's just stopped in its course. So it was a very good picture to use to illustrate slokas 321 through 229 of Viveka Chudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination between the real and the unreal, which wants to get you away from what? The appearance of the living being as God as two separate entities. That's all it wants to do. Is that too hard? Just quit seeing yourself as separate from God. That's where you're suffering. And all suffering is springing from that. So it's a very simple thing when the Rishi looks at it from a standpoint of already knowing it's himself to be one with God. No crossing necessary for Vivekananda, just born in Brahman, lives in Brahman, passes away back into Brahman, and nothing happens except Brahman. So keep that in mind as this second important facet of this Upanishad it wants to tell us about. First, cross over the ocean of birth and death, but why were you even there in the first place? Because you thought of yourself as being separate from reality. You created two bodies. And pardon me, but Advaya, there's only one. So let's start from the bottom of this then quickly. There's a freezing basement of forgetfulness of Atman. And that's the advent of bondage there. Let's take the ball and go back up the staircase. Now we grab the ball of bondage and we carry it like a chain, iron chain, you see. And we see that the ego became the owner of that ball at one point. And it's attained and insists that it's supreme over everything else. So it has to be taken away. It has to be beyond that stage we go, beyond that step. And that will be what's called the cold ground of neglect of Brahman. I found out that Brahman always exists, so I didn't really, I can't really lose it because it's my true nature, the seers are telling me. But I did neglect, which, basically is the whole meaning of this word of negligence of Brahman. So I found myself now back at the cold ground floor of neglect of Brahman. And this is where I must remember the self. I mean, that can be sung too. And it has been sung by great beings like, say, Tulsidas. It's been singing that. He prays to the Lord and says, "Oh Lord, here's my prayer to thee. Itani vinati raghunandana se dukkha dandva hamara bitauji. Itani vinati raghunandana se dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva vahara mitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Itani vinati raghunandana se." O Lord, that is my prayer to thee. So, dukkha dvandva. What does that mean?
Suffering.
Because of two. So that's where a great soul, great devotee of Ram, Tulsidas, who loves the Divine Mother because he wrote hymns to her, but guess what else he loves? Brahman. So aren't these great souls illustrators of how to love both God with form and without form? Even in India in Sri Ramakrishna's times, do you believe in God with form or without form? So they'd either take their pick, but you could see him thinking, wow, none of them answers both. You see, you can go through the whole gospel, all those Hindus there in the Kali Yuga, none of them said, well, I love both. They all said, God is with form. Another would argue and say, no, God's without form. And they'd actually get into little sampradayas and samajas and to argue with one another for the rest of their lives and hold grudges against each other for not believing the way they did. That's why he said, my watch keeps the only right time is the problem here in hot, humid old Calcutta, you see. So somebody like Tulsidas can come along and say, oh, Raghunanda, that's the scion of the Raghus, the king of the solar line. He's the love of the whole lineage came from the solar dynasty just to produce him. Just like thousands and thousands of more years of devotee of the devotees of Hindus, India, produced a Sri Ramakrishna in the 1800s. That much love went into the whole thing. See? So Tulsidas just comes forward and says, here's my prayer. As to he's seen all this, right? And he's loved God with form, but he's praying to Ram. Just remove the distinction of a line of demarcation between you and I. See? Because I'm finding out that all suffering that I see around me and that is even coming up inside of myself is only due to the fact that I'm thinking myself to be separate from thee. If I knew myself to be one with thee, I've never seen you in suffering, O Lord. I see you're always transcending suffering. That's one of the 7 steps of wisdom, right? Is to get rid of suffering and misery. Higher knowledge is based on that. So it can be sung, just like the Upanishads are kind of chanted, but these stotrams are sung, these bhajans. So let's a pause to bring some melting influence to this freezing river of forgetfulness of Brahman. We want to start to remember, not to forget. See, oh mind, please don't forget to remember. It's another beautiful song in India that has that line to it. So what was this caused by? My neglect of you, Lord. I stopped thinking about you. I stopped holding it at the center of my heart. Instead, what did I do? I wandered along all these avenues that were, yes, there in my heart and in my mind, but I didn't take you with me. See? And so I have to return to my own home. And you know how that sounds, right? To return to your own home. There's another song in India that says that. Mono chalo nija liketane. Mono chalo nija liketane. Samsara videshe videshirveshe Brahmo kino karane mono chalo nija iketane. So, O mind, return to your own home, your eternal abode. You're a foreigner in this foreign land. Why do you roam about aimlessly with no real purpose? 5 senses and elements, all these are different from you. Why have you become senseless in your attachment to others and forgotten your own true nature? Later on, he thinks, there's a roadside inn known as Holy Company. Take rest there if you become tired or weary. If you are confused about the way home, ask help of the holy ones who lives there. And don't forget to visit the king of the land. The king of the land has great power over all paths. Even the Lord of Death is afraid of him. So from Ayodhyanath Prakashi, beautiful Bengali lover of divine reality, sounds like he also believes both in form and formlessness, to the beautiful songs of Tulsidas in the Vaishnava tradition, how full and rich it is when you take away this contention. But also, that contention is based upon this idea that I'm separate, that the living being is separate from God. And we hate others because of that. Although we can't really define it that way, we don't like people because they're not showing us their divine nature. They've forgotten, like we have, and stumbling around the world. Don't forget that there are robbers, highway robbers on this road of life. And they're called greed and delusion. And they rob all travelers of their belongings. See? So set yourself on that path of truth. That would be in order to what? Get over the ocean, get yourself past and out of the ocean of samsara. That path of truth will be the final nadi you walk back inside, and there'll be an end to it, and that will release you from the ocean of transgression and the ocean of transmigration too. So all of this frozen cold river inspired me to bring you some warm teachings from beings who like to sing these teachings, not just lecture or discourse on them. From there, then, the desire to possess was the next problem. So you could see like the doorways of yoga. If you say, well, basically, I lost control of mind and speech, and that got me mixed up, right? So I have to retrace that. So Shankar is talking about that in one way. Now he's going about it by talking about people who found themselves in abject suffering, and the ocean of suffering had become frozen. Not it wasn't hellfire anymore. It was just total tamas. That's the ocean of darkness, the ocean of tamas, the guna of tamas. So if we're tracing our way back in that way, we find out, how did I get there? Well, from the cold floor of neglect of Brahman, it was because I desired to possess everything which was already mine. So I should have just realized it all belonged to God, as Sri Ramakrishna said, see, and left it in the hands of the Divine Mother, whose property it is. And then I could just move along, enjoy it as I will. And it would turn into bliss eventually, the bliss of Brahman. But I had to, since I fell, I had to take all of these doorways back inside of myself, follow all these pathways called nadis back inside myself, find out that there's a whole collection of worlds, like staircase, that I fell from. The ball of my mind rolled down each one. And now I have to trace it back to its source. I have to take that ball of the soul back to its source and give it back to Mother. Oh, sorry, I lost this. You gave it to me. I know it's yours. I have to return your possession now. Here's my mind. See, here, take my head, right? Kali cuts off heads, puts them around her neck. So those heads are all people who returned the ball to her. They got themselves out of the ocean of suffering. They lifted themselves out of the basin of frozen forgetfulness of God and reached the highest goal. Well, basically, desire happened because of thirst for enjoyment, and that happened because of brooding on the senses. That's a teaching that's in the Gita with Sri Krishna. It's also a teaching that's in Lord Vishishta's yoga. Is that starts off the whole thing rolling. And Shankara says here, as long as we're there at that quote, for the knower there is no greater danger than falling and then failing to remain in Brahman. To be always in Brahman should not be neglected, for that neglect is death. That's a spiritual suicide you're talking about there. Forgetfulness that can be turned around too. So this is another way in which Shankara puts it, like the doorways of yoga. Now let's look at even another way in which it's put, because I just mentioned Lord Vishishta. I know I'm running you ragged around all of these charts, and this is, of course, again, because we're studying the first two slokas of this Upanishad, and we want to know about this ocean of suffering, and how much of our being is still in it. You just might put it that way. I managed to take most of myself out of it, but I still got my big toe in it. So I want to extract everything from the ocean of suffering and be master of myself. How did Sri Ramakrishna put it in the gospel in the God blog yesterday? I want to be the superintendent of my own estate. Isn't that beautiful? Because he had superintendents of estates come to him and bow down to him. And he heard about their problems and so forth. So he thought, that's just like all the souls that are coming to me, suffering. They want free of this ocean of suffering. They have to become masters of their own estates. So in this way, you see, basically, it comes down to this mind's release from rebirth, is how Vishishta puts it to Sri Ram. By the way, Sri Ram is who we just sang to. Tulsi Das was ringing to Ragananda. That's that same Ram. So this is a teaching that Ram got when he was a young boy from the great old sage, Lord Vishishta. And you can read about this in Vishishta's Yoga. So the way this started out, this description from the great sage, was because the young teenage Ram asked, please inform me as to the nature of this dual mind and this inert body, and how the soul entwines itself inextricably in repeated rounds of birth and death on the wheel of samsara. So just take up the Upanishad again. That which helps you to cross over the wheel of birth and death, fear, aging, and death, is called Tarakam. So that Advaya Brahman is what one reaches. And to realize that, one will take up 3 different aims. That's what we'll be looking at next week. Now, this chart, again, all of these charts are in Footfalls of the Indian Rishis. It's a book that if you're taking course teachings in SRV, you probably should go get yourself one of those books. Can also be gotten 2 volumes instead of the one big one now. And then you always have these charts on hand to look back on, or have them ready when they're brought up. As some 300 of them now, I actually have about 420 now. This that I just showed you is number 420 that I created for this week, for this series. So some of those aren't in Footfalls, the later ones, but these ones I'm showing right here definitely are. And so you can see here that this all starts with the mind in bondage. Isn't it similar to the freezing basement of Brahman? Isn't it similar to the first doorway that you have to take through yoga to get it away from this garrulous talk, all these sounds that are distracting you? Like Holy Mother said, like gossip. You're gossiping. It's time to meditate on the Lord, and you're sitting around gossiping, she told the people near her. She overheard their conversation. So even then, the devotees and moral people, good people, can fall into these problems and all of a sudden find themselves suffering in this ocean of samsara when they're good people. How many good people are out there suffering right now? It's not just like we're casting aspersions or, pointing a finger at people. Even good people are suffering. What's that saying they use nowadays about that? It's basically to the effect that good people are also suffer pain. And it's not just evil people. In fact, sometimes evil-minded people are enjoying the world. So that becomes something to contemplate on. So basically, mind in bondage leads the soul, who in this particular story is called Manas. Lord Vashishta went to Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma said, I want to show you a soul that's really suffering. He's called Manas. Manas means mind. So you might as well just, point to the Burloka and say, how many billions of minds are like Manas? They're suffering. So he said, I want to show your mind in bondage. So Lord Brahma took him from this high chakra down to this lower world. They went traveling their consciousness, and they took on bodies that were pertinent to that particular realm, just like you take on a dream body. They took on a body, and then they went to visit Manas, and here's what Manas was doing. He was projecting a world of dire illusion and dwelling in it. They couldn't get him out of it. And here's what happened to him. He moved restlessly and bled amongst sharp brambles and thorns of sense objects, and subject himself to endless pains via self-inflicted whips of unfulfilling desires. Then he thought to get himself free of that. He dug a well of darkness and went into it in misery and brooded there. Remember, brooding on the sense objects, right, is this path. Then he sought release from ignorance by taking refuge in pleasure. A big mistake, as they say, right? And this is a web, right? You can see the whole thing is a web of Maya without a break in it and all connected. It's called here web of Maya, mind in bondage and so forth. So from there, and remember, Lord Brahma and his mind-born son, Lord Vashishta, are watching Manas do this. That's the whole implication of the story. Then he projected a pleasure garden. So he must have some powers, you see, this Manas. This mind must have a lot of powers. But that pleasure garden soon began to tire him and made him fall into fatigue. and remorse. So he pretty much drained his prana, his life force, by pleasures, like the rich do, with rich foods and objects of desire and lands and wealth and all that. So this pleasure was not a relief from this suffering. It led back to itself. He got reborn in ignorance and had to do this all again. Now, Lord Brahma and Vasishtha are poised outside of time. And so they're watching Manas do this several lifetimes in a row. It's like a few seconds to them, a few minutes to watch Manas do this. Oh, look, he got born again. Oh, he died again. Oh, he went back down the well again. Here he is, back again in the body. Look at, he's scratching himself with brambles again. Look at, he's making another palace garden, and trying to satiate himself when satiation never comes. On and on, they watch this going around. And so Lord Brahma did a little bit of divine intervention, we might say, at one point. And at one point, when he was about to project this pleasure garden, before he got reborn in ignorance, he caught a glimpse of truth because of Lord Brahma's grace, but only for a moment, just before he died. And the next time he was born, then he remembered this glimpse of light that he got. And this time he went past pleasure, pain and pleasure, and pulling himself out of this freezing ocean of forgetfulness, he began to practice some of the doors of yoga. You see, he got silent and he went inside and decided he would remain alone and not go into the whole dream of a pleasure palace with lots of buddies and friends and souls to engage with. He went alone. And at this point, he found out that he could go further, and he was reborn with this half-developed wisdom. And because that he was on the trail, then he sought guidance of a teacher. Remember, remember along the road of life, there is a roadside inn named Holy Company, right? So maybe he heard Tulsidas sing that song, or someone sing Tulsidas's song, and he thought, I need guidance, I need help. This wisdom is about as not quite that much more fulfilling than all of this. I had power, right? Now I'm getting wisdom, but I need more wisdom. Power's not enough. My teacher used to say that. Those who want power, they get Rolls Royces. But those who want God, they get peace. He lived in Oregon, by the way, and was head of the Vedanta Society of Portland. So basically, Manas got here, you see, and he decided that he would go further yet and get some guidance. So he gained holy company through the grace of a wise guru and got initiation. That's called mantra diksha. And there's actually at least 10 different kinds of diksha that I've looked up in the scriptures. Hasta diksha and manas diksha and mantra diksha. Mantra diksha is the one we usually get nowadays because mantra is that great principle that when practiced will demonstrate for you that the world is not separate from Brahman. And so the soul also not separate from Brahman. Mantra does that, makes that fact. So he's on the right track here. And then he went on, as we finish up this chart, a quick cycle, because we've gotten beyond the worst part of the rebirths of it, which is, again, what? And not getting outside of the ocean of transmigration, right, and suffering. The very first sloka that we're studying today. He went on and he mastered his desires and broke his attachments and attained full jnanam, not just some wisdom, but he got the jnanam. That is, the jnanam means the difference between what's real and what's not real, the difference between what's unchanging and what's changing, the difference between what's essential and what's non-essential, and the difference between what is ultimately real and that which is unreal. That famous Viveka of the Vedanta. So he got that Gyanam. And at that part, oh, by the way, the samsaric cycles just came to an end. See, so let's report back to our Rishi, who is saying, you must cross over this ocean of fear of birth and death and aging. It's called Taraka. Shiva, Taraka, will do it for you if you worship him. And so basically that samsaric cycle came to an end here. And this is where you see, should be there, a break in the web of Maya. It's like the ocean of samsara all of a sudden got still, right? So you might say that the ocean of samsara, you say the waves are distracting me, right? There are waves pounding on the shore, rising and falling constantly. It's got me attracted. It's got me hypnotized. But about here, I was still in the ocean of samsara. At least I thought I was. The ocean all got still for a minute. It got completely silent. And I went through that door and found my mind was causing all of that problem. It's causing all that distraction. It was causing the ocean of the mind to have waves. Now I'm going to still the waves of the mind, called chittavrittis, right? And there are great souls who are there in holy company to tell me how to do that. So I practiced that and they got the Gyanam of it. Therefore, I attained the incomparable state of Parabrahma. And that's where the old mind in bondage was now magically transformed, as it were, into chit shuddhi, the pure mind, you see. And in that pure mind, all of this web of Maya broke, and all of this became a bad dream that never happened. My series of lifetimes were dissolved back into the now ocean of Ananda. It was an ocean of suffering before, samsara. Now it's an ocean of Ananda, bliss. So maybe I'll name myself that, Ananda. And I'll quit suffering and I'll not just be manas, I'll be pure manas, the pure mind. So I think we've run out of time, but I have one more chart to show you about the effects of it all. If you want to study it in footballs ahead of time, we might look at it next time. Here's even another way how the soul gets itself back to its true nature after it has fallen below into abject suffering. How it comes back to this beautiful teaching that the Advaya Taraka Upanishad is telling us about, that all is Brahman and I am that. And in that way, then I should cross over this ocean of suffering. Anything that stands in the way of that realization will have to be turned from two into one, Advaya. Not two bodies, just one body. Not two realms of consciousness, just one realm of consciousness. Not two realities, it's not possible, just one reality. And I am that. I am Atma Brahma. Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Tvaye Shritva Pranamami Mahur Mahur Pranamami Mahur Mahur. O Sharda, Goddess Divine, O Ramakrishna, Teacher of all, in bosom holding those lotus feet, salutations to both be of mine. Om Shanti, 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 Hari Om, Hari Om. Om